maybe a small advantage for white here. Let's just quickly check. E5. So B4 is given. Being more relaxed about taking that pawn. Say this position. Rook C7. So yeah. Alright, so not even King D4 is needed. Although King D4 I think is a neat idea as well. Now here, maybe Knight A4. Is Knight A4 possible here? No, Rook FD8 is mate. That's why I'm such a pet, and not even over 2200 FIDE. So yeah, so Knight E4 would actually be essential in this position. And then Bishop E4, King E4, still advantage for white here. Okay, so why am I examining these sidelines of Bishop E3? Because in the game, after F4, it seems to be horrible for Anand now, after this Knight E4, positionally horrible. The last thing GMs want is to have dead positions, or ones where they're half strategically crushed, trying to sort of, pray for tactical possibilities. They don't like that sort of thing. So, and unfortunately, this is the kind of position Black has, almost, with the only slight thing about the opposite coloured bishops, but coming up, this knight is just horrible to have on D6. So Anand has to protect the B7 pawn, I guess, among other things. He has to get the king off that rook's firing line. Now Bishop D2, Anand challenges that horrible knight on D6. Now we have check, King D7. And now an interesting move, Bishop C3. I think some commentators are expecting Bishop B4. And for example, Bishop B4 takes, you don't even have to take immediately. Rook D1 might even be stronger here, keeping the rook really aggressive. Say Rook D8, check. Now you can take the pawn, for example. So it's more aggressive than taking the bishop. So Bishop B4 wasn't played though. So Bishop C3, curious. Still advantage for white. Still annoying pressure. Close Ribkroff. Bishop takes D6. Some people might think, oh, opposite coloured bishops, this is going to be an easy draw. Of course, opposite coloured bishops, they always draw as a gross generalisation. But in this position, what is it that gives white intense pressure, which even, at 27-87, Anand, he couldn't defend this position. He eventually cracked. What are the factors here? I think, these pawns at the moment are sealing Black's pawn structure horribly. They're locking Black's pawn structure in. This pawn is a tactical vulnerability. There's only one pair of rooks, so if it can transition later just to a king and bishop ending, the sources of counterplay are going to be less for Black, with rooks being able to check. Okay, so Rook D1, Bishop F5, and now Anand, I guess he could take on D6, but Topalov, he could take on D6, but there's no rush actually at the moment. The bishop's pinned. He plays a nice little move H4, preventing maybe G5 and G4. So he's constraining Black's pawn structure on both sides of the board. As I've often said, that's a common feature, it seems, of positional grandmasters, to restrain pawn structure. Pawns are the soul of chess, Philidor once said. So why not constrain all of the opponent's pawns, limiting their position? So G6, putting a pawn on a light square, potentially creating permanent, these weaknesses. Are they going to be exploitable later, these dark square weaknesses? Our white piece is going to infiltrate there later. So Rook takes D6 check, King C8. Now this first target is used, Bishop D2, and then plays now Rook D8, going down a pawn, but hoping, he could defend this opposite coloured bishop and pawn ending. Topalov goes for it. He plays bishop takes f4. So the scene is set for a very controversial endgame, with lots of commentators saying as though Anand fluffed up a draw. But I think Anand himself was not sure in the post-game interviews if he could have held this ending that easily. So rook d6 ed. The problem is, White's king has got menacing squares to start marching to now. Also, engines which people use a lot to commentate, they're not that hot on endgames. Usually you need table bases to get really the truth out of endgames. I think computers start going into infinite loops and they don't see the schematics, the long-term king manoeuvres or bishop manoeuvres, and the long-term passed pawn possibilities that easily. So I think viewers are a bit confused here. Is White going to only have to be content with a draw here? Okay, so king e3. The king starts marching into Anand's position. So leaving Anand more and more passive here. So king e5. Anand's clinging on to his pawns. Bishop e3. Okay, you might argue, look, the bishop's got no targets. These pawns are all on knight squares. Where's the damage? Where's the pain going to come from? You might ask. Well, d7 is always a menacing threat, especially with bishop g5. So Anand's careful not to allow d7. Bishop a4, stopping d7. King f4. The king's got another mission in mind. Go to g5. Maybe play g4 later. Maybe h5 later. All these possibilities. All these cards to play at the right moment. The most painful time to play them. So bishop b5. Bishop c5. Protecting pawn for a moment. King f6. Depriving white of the g5 square. King's kicked back now. Bishop d4. And now the king ventures to g5. Maybe to h6 soon. Bishop c6. In fact now king h6. Tying Anand defensively. What is he going to do about h7? He has to play this. Maybe king g8. Now Topalov doesn't mind this liquidation here, potential liquidation of two pawns. h5. And then doesn't oblige. He doesn't play g takes. In fact, g takes. Well, these pawns are going to be liquidated anyway after the next move, but we still have this potential. This g4 and is this bishop going to be tied down to d6 continually, as well as protecting g6? That's the question. Bishop e8 was played. Right, so you might wonder, well, what about g takes? You might wonder. Okay, what's White's winning plan here? Can he generate just another passed pawn? Maybe, he first takes on h5, then maybe like f4, g5, f5 to try and generate another passed pawn, keeping, black's king tied down. There's a long-term planning schematics needed to work out that one out. So anyway, bishop e8, king g5 was played. Trying to come into f6, that would be nasty. So Anand stops king f6 with king f7. King goes back. We're in for a long torture session here. So king g8. Now bishop c5. Alright, so the bishop can't move to f7, d7 for example. So it has to lurk around to stop d7. Or does it? If the black king's on f7, then maybe the bishop can, as people pointed out later, come to d3 to hold up the king side, and if ever d7, assuming the bishop's not here, to play king e7. So basically, can these guys swap roles? That this one doesn't have to defend d6. The king can defend d6, and this bishop can defend this guy. Well, this was actually too much for Anand in the game, as we're about to see. So g takes h5. Topalov doesn't mind that pawn sack. These pawns are crippled. He plays king g5 again with the menacing threat of king f6, and then defends that again. King g7. Now check, and then has to keep on the f6 square to stop this infiltration. Now bishop e5. This pawn's going to drop off. Maybe
In fact, if king g8, you don't want now king f6. So Anand just sacks the pawn now, h4, which is given praise by many commentators. If king takes, king g6, for example, or perhaps this plan now, bishop b5 to d3, requires precision anyway for black here. So king takes, so he does actually play king g6. Topalov plays king g4, and he must have been thinking, this is close to a draw now, opposite coloured bishops. How could I make progress here? Everyone knows opposite coloured bishop endings are an easy draw, so what happened? Well, bishop b5 was played,